Do you remember a year and a half or so ago when people told us what they wanted, right? A lot of people took some time and thought about it and put in discussions about what they wanted for their city's future. And it revolved a lot around sustainability. It revolved a lot around green spaces and exciting places to be. They wanted a really nice city. They wanted something different. They wanted to take the disaster and turn it into an opportunity. There wasn't, I didn't think, a sense of, oh, poor us, tragedy is us. And there was this, okay, now we get the chance to actually fix this city up, right? It was a positive move forward. Well, does anybody know what happened to that? Sort of where did it go? And it isn't just that it's been slow and that it's been a hard slog or that we're all sort of persnickety people and have a hard time agreeing on things. That wasn't it. That's not the problem. We're actually facing a risk that's bigger than that earthquake, right? What is the biggest risk to our future? Well, thank you to the press for putting this in the newspaper today or yesterday. That's the biggest threat to our future right here. What we decide to do, that's the problem. Because, try for a minute, try picturing what those developments look like. Just think about it. What do they look like? You can see the gate, can't you? The big stone gate at the beginning, at the entrance. And the beautiful sign, and it says on it something like something brook, right? Something farms. Something meadows. All right, well, okay, it used to be that, but now it's a subdivision. It's a suburb. And it's not really even a suburb as we know it here in Ilam, which was once a suburb built on farmland. It's what I'm going to call now an ex-burb. It's out there, and it's out there quite a ways. And that makes a big difference when we're looking forward in time. So the idea that we might actually do this just really had it grounded in me for a while. And then I started thinking, you know what? That's an insane thing to do. The council has been saying, and the people have been saying, no, we're not going to do that for a very long time. But now we're going to do it. And we're going to do it in a big way, and we're going to do it so fast that there won't be anything that can stop it. So yes, it's possible we could get LURPed. Now, in case you all don't know why I'm saying that's a real disaster for us. Cheap oil is over, in case you didn't notice. Anybody have an idea what oil cost about a decade ago? Yeah, 20-ish, about a fifth of what it costs now. That has not been good for our economy. And what it has caused is ex-urban collapse around the world. We didn't have ex-burbs to collapse here. In Denver, in Phoenix, in Las Vegas, all over the United States, they had ex-burbs, and they've collapsed. Okay? Now, that said, Denver has a thriving downtown urban redevelopment going on. People are paying premium price and flocking to the center of the city, to walkable neighborhoods, that sort of thing. The great big developments out on the plains, you can't give those houses away. That is a risk. Can we afford to give away that much value? We're talking billions of dollars that we just spent, maybe even just 5 or 6 years ago, down the drain. Right? This is a big problem. And not just the money. Will it even work to have this ex-urban plan? You can dream about maybe running a trolley out there or something, but the economics of that really doesn't work. The picture that I've shown you here on the left is the probability that you'll be getting a certain amount of fuel in the world oil supply over the future years. And what you'll see is that there really isn't any chance at all you're going to have more fuel to work with. You're going to have to be using less. And where it's going to get squaz is going to be personal transport first. I don't think we're going to give up fishing before we give up driving to the movies. All right? That's probably what's going to happen. So the map that you see there is a map that was generated by Stacy using the computer program that he developed, the methodology implemented in a computer program during his PhD, which shows you risk. It's areas, if you live in a house, these are actually pixelated points put on a house. If you're living in a house that has a green color, you can transition. You can just adapt to using less fuel down to the point where you don't even need any fuel. You don't even need a car to live there. And you can see, if you're a historian at all, that that is the size of Christchurch before cars, the green area. And then the yellow area is about the size that Christchurch got to about the time cars really started coming in. But there were still trolleys through most of that time, electric trolleys that ran around the town, and people really got around by bicycle. So yellow is that you have some loss of activity, you have some risk of losing economic connections, and orange is not looking too good, and red is that you can't adapt. You can't get to anything without a car. So the people who are in red zones right now, energy red zones, so to speak, are going to have to change over time, and it might be that their properties are only useful for people who don't want to go anywhere over the next 20 years or so. So does it make sense to LURP ourselves and sort of go out there? That's the perspective we're talking about. Look at where the high-risk zones are already, and we're talking about going well outside of those. All right, probably not a good plan. I understand we need housing. We desperately need housing. If anything, this is a pretty big embarrassment for the people of our city to have left people who have damaged houses and really unlivable houses living in them this long. We really could have done better on that. And so right now is the time to fix that. If we desperately need housing, then let's get on to that and let's do it. Let's not destroy our city. Turning our city wrong side out, putting 40,000 homes outside of the city in an ex-burb sprawl, we won't get our central city back. There will be no reason to put it there. It will pull apart our city. There won't be, why would you go all the way into the central city? Maybe occasionally for a football game, but you'll go to the mall that's closest to you. So this is really a threat to our city, this LURPing. Let's focus on what we need then. We need 15,000 people housed quick. We've needed that for a couple of years, and we really need that to happen. But it needs to be within the urban area, and it needs to be affordable, profitable, and sustainable housing, and it needs to, when we build this housing, it needs to drive the development in our central city, not destroy it. So that's what we plan to do, and that's our project, which I'm now going to present to you. First, I'm going to give you a brief overview of how the methodology worked. We've handed out a sheet that has sort of the steps of the methodology, and I'm not going to crunch through that any more than you would want me to crunch through how you do structural analysis. I mean, it's not the exciting part. But we will show you how it evolved that we did it. And then we want to give you the project results. What did we find? Because remember when I asked you to picture that suburb way up there north of the river? You could picture it, couldn't you? You know what it looks like. You know how comfortable those houses would be. And it would only be a little commute, 30, 40 minutes to work. What's that? In the UK, they go more than that, right? All right. Can you believe that that suburb could be built? Can it happen? Are there the regulations in place? Is there the financing in place? What does it take to build one of those big suburbs? There's only one farmer between you and that suburb, right? We know what it takes to get that done. So all of that is believable. Do you picture what the alternative is? Do you know what it is? Do you believe it could happen? That's what I'm going to show you. All right. And then we have time for discussion, because we would like to know, we've been doing this because it needed doing, and we would like to know, what should we do next? Where does this go? Once you believe that we can have a very long-term plan for our city and we can do it in a way that's sustainable, what do we do about knowing that, now that we know that? All right, here's our project methodology. We can put it into 3 baskets. The first one is the time frame. All right, we know that anything that happens in a city, somebody builds something, an emperor comes and builds himself a Arc de Triomphe or something. These things happen, and they become part of the warp and weft of the city. They leave their imprint, and that just keeps happening. I mean, there are some things in London that are actually Neolithic, right? That's where the Neolithic people had their fishing camp or something. You know, these things, they're always there, and they just keep going. So for Christchurch, I think if you went back 150 years, you would start to see why we are where we are, why things are the way they are. You would start to see those imprints, and you work your way forward to today. And you can see that what we do now is going to have a profound impact for the next 100 years. Now, 100 years is a big stretch for how long we are willing to consider. I mean, economics tells us that 14 years, things have no value. So what are we doing talking about 100, right? Well, 100 years from now is actually, that is the outside limit of what the council even has any remit to even remotely consider. But we will take a lesson from our indigenous people who've been here longer than us and understand that it's probably a good idea to have a long time frame sometimes. Sustainability, I'm going to tell you what I mean by sustainability. Those of you who've heard me talk before, no, I don't go in for that. It's not sustainability that's our problem, it's unsustainability that's our problem. So sustainability to me means continuity. It's what continues. Because if it's not sustainable, it doesn't continue, right? So what is going to continue? Well, as long as humans are living here, we are known to nest, right? We are large brain primates. We have a nest. We go to it every night and we sleep. And we do that with our group, our family group, with our whānau. And we take care of them while we're there together. And we groom ourselves. And we garden and we fix meals together. That's us. We go to a place. So we have a residence. That's important. And then we leave the residence during the day. And we go out and we work. That's what we call it. You could call it all sorts of things, but the truth is we leave. We leave the residence and we go out. And sometimes we get educated. Sometimes we help other people. But we go out and then we have to forage. So we have to go looking for food, which in our day and time means going to the supermarket. But we always will do that. We always will go out to the market, and from that market, we will get things to eat. And other things too. We'll get shoes, we'll get hats, we'll get coats from people who are good at making them. And while we're out there, we might do some recreation and some leisure, do some other things. And while we're at work, we might get a coffee. And if we're lucky, we might go out and have someone else do the cooking for us. That's always a nice thing to do. And if we need medical help, that's also out there somewhere. And then there's all the other things we do. We join with other people to do things we enjoy doing, things that make us a community, that make us a place. So we like to go to these places. So that's always there. 150 years ago, you could still say exactly these same things, well, except maybe not the coffee. But people were doing things. At lunchtime at work, they might even go out and do something. Maybe have a tea instead of a coffee. How does it keep working? If you can connect those things together, it will work. Those connections right now have all been based on petroleum-driven private vehicles. Will that continue to work? It's possible, but we probably need to calculate and figure that out and change it if it won't work. And that is, I want you to keep this nice, lovely diagram in mind because this underpins everything we have done. How are those connections working? Where are the activities people go? We call this an activity system. What you do, where you go, and how you get there. And your ability to access all of those things that you need to do. That is how you have an economy. And transition engineering is the work of making sure that happens. So if we're going to do engineering, we have some engineers here, the odd one or two. If you're going to be an engineer, you need what? First, you need the requirements of the problem. The problem right now, the urgent problem that is giving us the permission to sprawl when we have decided before that we're not going to sprawl is the problem that we have a lot of neighbors who don't have a place to live. And we really need to do something about that. I agree. And they need an affordable place, but let's not run them out of town, please. Let's stick together on this. Let's help each other out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take care of the red zoners. 12,000 people need new homes. That's our job. That's what we're going to figure out how to do. We need to reduce the risk to the property values and the economy of our future by staying within the urban limit. And we are going to drive the redevelopment of the CBD. And also, we're going to make sure Canterbury gets back on its feet. We do have a problem. Some of you younger folks will know what I'm talking about, that the people from around the country, the young people, aren't that thrilled about coming to Canterbury to do their degree because there's no city. There's nothing to do. So that's one of our priorities of something that needs to happen quite quickly too, is to get the students so they don't have to live in a tent on somebody's front yard. And so they have somewhere to go. They have student life. They have a college town. All right, does that seem doable? Can you picture it? Can you see how it would happen? Okay, then we'll keep going so you can see it. All right. We decided what we would do is go prospecting. Right? If I was a developer and I wanted to build a big suburb, I would go out prospecting, and I would be looking for what? The farmer who was willing to sell me the land. That would be about what I needed. And make sure that my big gate would look good from the highway. But that's about it. So we went prospecting. We said, if we're going to get these 12,000 people housed ASAP, then it needs to be on TC1 land. Because we can't be taking the time to get approval for new kinds of foundations. We need to be able to build what we know how to build on solid ground and get it done. So TC1 land, that means we are looking here. We're looking in that gray area. That's all land that has stood still, which is good, and it probably will stand still. So that's, and it's within the urban boundary. So that's where we're looking. Another thing is, if we're looking there, there's a pretty good chance there's already somebody there. It's not going to be an issue. It'll be fine. It'll be good for everybody. But what we're looking for is a high property redevelopment index. If I'm looking at a house, like my house that was built in the 60s, there comes a time. I've been dreaming about building myself a little granny flat up the front, a nice little insulated, warm thing. Yeah, there comes a time when you just can't see what to do with that old house anymore. How much money are you going to put into it to try and bring it up to standard and make it comfortable? Just, I don't know. There comes a time when, it's time to move on. And so that's what we're looking for here. If you look at the blue, this dark blue to yellow, that's where they've got houses like me, where, we're at that point where it may make a lot more sense to deconstruct that house, reclaim what you can from it, and build good houses now. Okay? The rest of this opportunity is we're looking for old houses. We're looking for things that are before any kind of reasonable standard for how you're going to build a house. And there we're looking for the blue and gray areas. And all of these, of course, proximity to Christchurch in the TC1 zone. We're looking for these opportunities. Now we're starting to zoom in on an area where the scores for all of those things put together comes out the best that it can. And we're starting to look now for those connections. How, if we're going to put 12,000 more people in an area here, where are they going to be able to get to? What can they do? Well, this is only 6.5 kilometers to the center of the city. It's only 6.5 kilometers to the airport. It's a short hop to Christchurch, Canterbury University. It's directly connected to a lot of commercial zone and a lot of work. There's a lot of work just to the south of this area. So welcome to our prospect. This prospect is bounded by Curlitz and Piers, Ilam Road, Blenheim Road, and University of Canterbury. This area has a lot of amenities that you won't find out on the plains. It already has access to sewer, water, park, schools, medical shops, library, church, work. There are assets here that we can take advantage of that hopefully are at least equal to the asset of green pasture with one farmer between me and my subdivision. All right? So, welcome to New Rickerton. Can you picture it yet, New Rickerton? I'm going to tell you about the urban form so that you can picture it. We're going to understand what New Rickerton is like. And we're going to do that in the context of the activity systems that people there will be doing. And then I'm going to explain to you how I see the rollout of this happening, what we are calling the cooperative development model. How is that going to work? All right, New Riccarton right now doesn't look all that new. As we said, it's actually quite full of old things. But it could become a new city. It could become, I mean, all up, we're talking 20,000 people. There's about 4,000 people living there now. 4,000 to 5,000 people. We're talking about a town of 20,000 people. Can you think of a town like that? Ashburton-ish? Think about a town like Ashburton. Does it have its own central city? Does it have its own downtown? Does it have its own amenities? Does it have its own culture? We're talking about actually planting a town instead of spreading a suburb. So, to do that, however, we have to get everything underneath right, which is how we came up with sort of from the ground up. It all has to be right from the bottom up, and then it will work. So for us, the minimum use of energy is important, especially transport energy. We have to be able to move ourselves in this town. We want to optimize the use of time and maximize the number of connections, and we want to be planning for humans, for what it's like to be there, and for an economy that works. Economy is the connection between people who have a service to provide and somebody who needs the service, somebody who's making something and somebody who needs it. Economy's connection. It's not an abstract thing, it's actual activities. So if we can support those activities, the economy will exist, and it will be fine. This is the area of New Riccarton. In order to develop New Riccarton, I don't have the one farmer. I've got 1,400 houses. Structures, pre-1980 structures. Those people who are now in those structures, we know a lot of them are renters. So we're going to have to talk them into moving from an old, damp, uninsulated, dark, funny structured house with a big garden they can't possibly take care of at about $250 to $400 a week into an apartment that's clean and dry and warm and comfortable. What do you think? Do we have a deal for you? Could we make that deal with some people? I think we might be able to talk them into trading up, taking the value of their property and trading it in for a new property. And they can shop for that new property in the development here. They get first choice. Do they want to stay where they were, or move over closer to the university, or move down closer to the school? Because within that area, it's all going to be redeveloped. It's all, I mean, blank slate, basically. We can put things where we like. So if you don't want to stay there, if you want to cash out instead of trade in, that's fine too. Because there's plenty of suburb left in Christchurch, and there's plenty of those cold, damp, uninsulated houses to choose from if you don't want one that's warm and insulated. Okay, now each one of these corridors, we've been threatening you with having these things be pedestrian zones. I mean, you know this scary thing of not having a car parked in front of each dwelling and having a driveway to the back and a nice garage to the back. We've been threatening you with that. We're going to make room for people now, not just cars. We're not going to engineer the whole system for cars. It's going to be for people. So how in the world are we going to live without our cars? And if you look at each one of these quarters that we're talking about, they're roughly the size of the campus of Canterbury University. Do I need a car to go from my office over there to the bookstore over there? Not really. The biggest distance across Canterbury University takes you 10 minutes to walk. That's why the classes are 10 minutes apart. All right? We don't understand that concept of walkability because we don't do it. We don't build the spaces for ourselves to do it, except maybe university campuses and airports. But we actually can walk. We've discovered that in our project. All right, so each one of these corridors becomes a pedestrian zone, and each quarter will probably have its own culture. We plan to give the architects that remit. If you look at the one that's up by the university, why not have that be a college town? Why not have the nightlife happening there? And the one that's over by Riccarton High School, why not have that be the family one? All right, so each of these corridors, according to green urban design, which Sebastiano caught us all up on that quite well, each quarter of 5,000 people should have its own square. It should have its own place where everybody can go within, and we're talking a 5-minute walk here at the most. You can go down to the square. Oh, let's just go down to the square. So maybe the one in the university area is called the College Square. Let's go down to the College Square and let's go down to the pub there, right? Or let's go have a pizza, right? So the College Square there, Atifa made a picture there for us that's sort of indicative of what it's like to transition from the area where people are living, and you have your paths, and you have some open space area into the square there where people go to sort of hang out or to participate in the market, as it were, or to work. And then we have one main square that's a cultural center and an activity center for 20,000 people, plus the people from outside that come there. That's where the Bush Inn is now. So can we actually do that? Can you squeeze 20,000 people into that spot? We said it's all actually quite walkable. Is it possible? That was actually our question. We don't know. I don't know by looking at it. So we calculate stuff. We look at how big is a house and how many of them are there and how much land are we talking about, right? Do you believe that we could triple, quadruple the population that's there? Well, people are doing it all the time, aren't they? They take off one house and put in 3, 4, 5. If they're 2 stories, they can even squeeze 5 on the same lot. What I'm pretty sure of is that that's not nice, right? Would you let your kids out to play in the yard? Of what, you know the ones I'm talking about? You got this little slice, and there's just enough room to squeeze your car in there. That's what you've got. Well, or you leave it out in the road. Yeah, everybody does that because it's not worth trying to get in there and dent yourself. So if you think about taking down all the fences and sort of scraping it off and looking at the land and saying, okay, how would we actually organize those houses? You can actually open up and have a lovely area around your house and your own patio and your own little bit of yard and then common areas, and you can do so much more with it. So that ad hoc sort of infill housing is probably not the best plan for how to beat the suburbs, and it's not going to happen in time anyway. So this planned build out of a city of 20,000 people going to 133 people a hectare and 48 houses a hectare from where we are now, 28 and 10. Also, Sebastiano modeled according to the best urban design principles, and we're only talking about covering 50% of the land with houses. Okay, so it's not solid houses just stuck together as close as they can be. 50% of the land is houses and the rest is other things. So really, yes, it's not that hard. On international standards, what we're talking about barely even makes medium density. That's not a high density area, by anybody's standards. It's a pretty medium thing. And we can have mixed residential zones. We're not talking Hong Kong with high rises or anything. We're talking 3 to 4 stories max, probably 4 stories more over in the student area where they have strong legs and can get up the stairs. What you're seeing there is sort of a tightest where you might really squeeze things together, again, maybe over in the student area. But that's your worst case scenario right there. That's the horror that we all live with if we don't go out into the suburbs and spread across the plains. It's living like that. Are there people who could deal with it? I think it'd probably be all right. Especially students. I mean, look at the demographics. We've got a lot of people aging. We're going to be talking about 2 people per home. We've got a lot of couples that don't have kids for quite a while. We've got a lot of divorced parents, single parents. We've got a lot of students in this area. Housing on a scale with a 2-bedroom apartment or so is actually, there's a huge demand for that. And again, like we said, we looked at the demand profile, and you could definitely fit 20,000 people. Again, worst case scenario there. Not what everybody's forced to live in because we all put on black boots, and no, we didn't do that. All right. If you look at that land and you look at where things are, mixed use residential, some large employment, some big commercial developments, and how those would be connected together and how far each person would have to go from each of the different types of residences to the different types of zones, that's the integrated land use. And looking at that, again, not only is it possible to fit that many people in that space quite comfortably without even a squeeze, it's possible to fit a heck of a lot of activities in there. And it's very possible for those people to get around in that space. The walking distance is 10 minutes from anywhere in the town to the center, the main center, It's 20 minutes if you had to go all the way across it. So it's an evening stroll, really. It's not that far. By cycle, 4 minutes from anywhere in the city to the main center. And what's at the main center? Well, basically everything's at the main center. Your connections to the rest of the city, your connections to employment, and an awful lot of services. All right, tram connections to the city. All right, trams are an interesting thing. Again, Sebastiano's had experience in transport planning, and so has Stacy. So looking at that and knowing what it costs, and knowing that so far we've had the aspiration to have electric trams in our city, but nobody's been able to figure out how to make the economics work, because it's not economical to bring the 5,000 people from Rolliston in by electric tram. It's just not. Well, you need are short distances with very heavy traffic loads, very big destinations, pulling people back and forth, pulling them along a corridor where they get off and do something on their way to the next thing. That's what you need to have trams work. So if we put 20,000 people in Rickerton, and we have the central city coming back with the employment, and we have the big work areas along the way, and we have the airport, we actually can drive that kind of development. So let's look at how we actually manage that transition now. And what we're in is a race here. We're in a race for the future of our city. We either get something else done, or we get LURPed. So how do we get this done? How do we save our city's future? Well, again, have we got a deal for you? You can trade up your property. You can invest in a property if you don't live there now. And you can become a resident. A resident of New Rickerton is a special thing. Yeah, I live in New Rickerton. Oh yeah, you don't even need a car. No, I don't need a car. You live in New Rickerton. What do you pay for electricity? Coldest month. What do I pay in my house? You don't even want to know, but we did top 500 a month last year. What do you pay for electricity in your 3-bedroom house in New Rickerton? Oh, about $40 a month? Yeah, that's what I thought. Engineering, doing it right. That's all we got to do. It's not that hard. Passive design, good insulation. Why not? You live in New Rickerton? Yeah, I'm a resident. I'm going to become a resident of New Rickerton. We've got our place picked out, and we like the area where they were doing this. So we decided to wait a couple months to go there. All right? What does it cost to live there? There's a lot of places around the world where affordability has become a very big problem. We're not the only ones. And the way to deal with it is decoupling the land from the property values. If we're going to get people to trade in their houses or sell out their houses, and we get a clean slate to work from, we don't have to include the bit of property, the bit of dirt under the house in the property value. All right? It's called condominiums, townhouses. You can drop the house price way down by doing that. You can have an affordable $100 a week 2-bedroom house. Why not? Do we not deserve that? Do we not want a city where people have money to spend to go out? I mean, we wanted economy here. We wanted economic activity. That's how you're going to get it. Have affordable housing. Now, the legal structures for doing this, again, don't have to invent anything new. We just have to learn. We have to learn how it's done. And that is a residence trust. It's like if we were going to build a new city, it would be incorporated. It would have a trust. It would have people who are entrusted with making sure it works. And these people manage investments, they manage the contractors, negotiate block permits, contract for the work that's done around the gardens, the paths. They collect residence fees, and then negotiate with the city for much lower rates. Much, much lower rates per house. Why? Well, the amount of street. Have you ever looked at the city council's budget? What is the number one biggest expense in this city? The roads, exactly, the roads. And if you add on top of that the crashes, the running over people, all this kind of damage that's not going to have to be picked up at the DHB anymore. We are talking about a very significant savings. And also the design of this city where we aren't surging our rainwater into the system anymore. And we're very, very conservative on water. We don't use water the way the old suburbs did. We don't have leaky pipes the way the old suburbs did. You know that all that water's got to be pumped. The city council's going to save a mint by this development. What do they have to do for the ex-burban development? It costs 300 and some thousand per thousand, 300 and some million per 1,000 houses more to build out on the plains than in the city. All right, they're going to give us lower rates. All right, now, how many of you saw the Breathe competition? All right, if you haven't seen it, what it is, the city council said, here's a little piece of land over by Latimer Square. Give us your best, ye architects. Do your thing. And they got lots of entrants. And there was a competition, right? And they had experts who looked at them, and the finalists, you can go look at them, and they're pretty good. There's some pretty crazy things in there. But why are we competing for market share? If we had an actual drive to develop within the city, we could be competing for customers, not just for the stamp of approval. Why not have architects competing for the market, for buyers? For, if this is the most popular one, then okay, there's about 20 blocks of that and only one of the, loopy other one with the straight lines that nobody really seemed to like. Let the people decide what they want and let's get it built, shall we? What's standing between us and that? Not knowing what to do with it? Oh, let's do it then. How are we going to do that? I know what to do if I buy the land from the farmer. I get the bulldozer. I do have to design the lovely front gate, and then we got to lay out our cul-de-sacs, right? Lay in the broadband. It's all going real well so far. And then over to you all. Go find your builder, go find your design, and have a good time, right? And there's a lot of builders, a lot of designers, but every one of those builders now has to find a contractor. They have to get the skips, they have to get the bulldozers, they have to get the delivery of their wood to build that house. This is not efficient. Economy of scale is efficient. If I could actually build one of those whole blocks at once, and if I started up in the left-hand corner, if I started up there with the worker apartments and the temporary housing for the people who got moved out, and the construction offices where you can go to do your shopping if you want to live there. And you can go to look at the models of the different houses and look at what the prices are and things like that. If I started with that, then I would have a place for all of the deliveries of the wood to come in, all of the deliveries of the tile to come in, all of the equipment to come in, a place for it to be locked up at night. The way that it goes to the site the next day is known. I've got site control, I've got rubbish control, I've got materials flow control, I've got worker access. I can build this so much more efficiently this way, where it is built out in a planned way. And our supply chains are planned, and we can get much better prices on things. We can get workers who are skilled because they do the same thing until they get it right, hopefully on my house. No, they'll be good. And then we start with the student accommodation as well, because if we relieve the pressure off the rental market of the students, then it's going to be a little bit easier to just keep going with this. And we build them their college town square and their pedestrian pathways through their residential area, and we get Canterbury back on its feet. If Canterbury's on its feet, everything's going to look better. And then you can imagine a block-by-block rollout here then. Block by block. And we know what people want ahead of time because they've already bought it. They've already put their down payment. They've already arranged their financing. And they've gotten pretty sweet financing too, because we can actually show them from the modeling what their energy bills are going to be, what their rates are going to be, and how their living expenses are going to be so much lower here than they would be somewhere else. All right, and remember, it's not just housing there either. We've got a lot of other things to build. There's a lot of premises. There's these squares with shops all around them. There's a lot of facilities and a lot of amenities that 20,000 people can support. We have this very low density city, and then we wonder why we don't have enough restaurants and things like that. It's because there isn't enough foot traffic in any one place to really support, very good things. We have some very good ones, and they rely on people coming from a long ways away to get there. So this concentration of people really gives us an economy of scale for getting good quality amenities in there. Now, the transportation is probably the one that's the hardest to get our heads around, because we have anybody here who remembers the days of the electric trolleys and getting around by bike? Okay, we got a few. But the rest of us have never seen a Christchurch other than the rather car-infested one that we've got now. And that one that was infested with bicycles and walkers and the occasional tram was a different place, was it? Yep, it was a different place. And so looking forward, it's not the same old trams, it's definitely not the same old bicycles, it's modern ones, but how do we actually make that change? What does that look like as we change from our car city to the new city? And we have some transitionary ideas here. The first one is to get, well, there's Rickerton today, and then if you can get these dedicated bus lanes where you sort of carve out a bit more space for the buses and you take away the parking, then you start to have a whole different feel to the space. And it starts to change in a way that then the next step to go to get your trams in, you actually have the space to put the trams in. And you have the ability to put the trams in. And you have the traffic now, because we're starting to really build up the population in that area. You have the population that it takes to start driving that tram. And we start to have some things happening downtown to attract the tram traffic. And then by the time you get to the end, you've got your developments along the tram line is there, the population is high there, and nobody's really driving cars anymore anyway, so you've transitioned all the way to the future. So yeah, it's not that one day you outlaw cars and everybody has to walk whether there's a tram or not. You actually, there's a planned phase in. And what are these trams I'm talking about? Well, if we connect up the airport, which it looks like there's a lot of activity out at the airport as far as jobs, commercial developments, things like that out towards the airport. We connect up down to Hornby, where again, lots of jobs, lots of industry down in that area, and connect up through the central city over to the Polytech area, where again, there's lots of industry down in there. And they all sort of meet at Bush Inn, which is one of those reasons why that becomes a nice center for that kind of transportation. The demand for that travel with that many people in that area is possibly high enough to pay for those trams. But what if those trams at night were also moving goods? They're moving from industrial areas where goods come in, where goods are manufactured, where goods are distributed, and they're moving through a retail and commercial area where those goods need to go. Why not dual purpose our trams? It's a matter of not that much design difference to be able to keep those trams making money all night long. I mean, you know your trucks are running at night, right? That's going around to your supermarkets, depositing things. It would take some design, but we actually can do that. All right. So, transitioning from car travel, this Bush Inn area, you guys noticed that there was a lot of streets going through there. All right, and there's a lot of traffic going through there. There really is a lot of traffic. Is it actually sensible that there's that much traffic on Rickerton Road? Of course it's not. That road was never, it can't carry those volumes of traffic, which is why it's a disaster. And we have a very big 2-lane separated road just down the road on Blenheim, where all that traffic can go. So the transition there for sort of reclaiming that area as a town center instead of as a congested place where people are trying to get through is to just divert the traffic down to Blenheim. So again, something that has to be transitioned. You have to sort of plan for the signaling and how that's going to work. But it actually looks like Blenheim can carry those volumes. And don't forget, by the time we get to 2018, the volumes are going to be much lower anyway. So as long as you can drive through Rickerton, you will think that you should be able to, but you really shouldn't. It's not really meant to be a big thoroughfare for people cruising back and forth. So what we see is eventually when we've got this done, that whole corridor from Bush Inn down to the park is actually a tramway and pedestrian corridor. Now, any of you who've ever been to one of those, they are the most lively, best places to be, the place to be, where you go, you know, because you can hop on the tram and go down to the other end and go to a movie, or you can go that way and go to dinner. It's the place to be. So it's called a development corridor. And it's anchored by a lot of people at one end and a lot of activity at the other end. And eventually, hopefully, the people in the center city too. But again, I don't think the development of houses in the central city is going to outpace the sprawl development. Whereas the TC1, well-connected, old houses with a good property development index could possibly outpace the sprawl developments. All right. The church corner, can it transition into a urban central city? It could do. It's a matter of design and building. So I have faith in our architecture friends that they could do this. Right now, it's very purpley meaning cars, because there's a lot of parking there. But over time, as people no longer drive there, it can transition into a central city where there's lots of things going on. Lots of retail space, office space, well, not lots, but enough for 20,000 people or thereabouts. And it looks quite different. It's still got the history. It's got the history of the church. It's got the history of the graveyard. It's got the history of the old Bush Inn and a historically designed trolley terminal, just for fun. It's got the thing marked number 1 is the first piece that goes in, and it's a spreading of the restaurant and the bar that's there to take over some of that parking lot, to take it over as human space. And the coffee place as well can come out there. And I'm sorry, you have to drive this way and you have to drive that way. You can't just roar through there anymore. But you start to carve back some of the space from the cars and actually create a place to go that's better. Right? So that sort of transition, I think it's all possible. I can see it. The discussion we need to have is if it's worth trying to, I mean, like I said, this was a lot of work by a lot of volunteers with a very nice diverse skill set, being able to bring in the best from all around the world of what's known, looking at what everybody else has already thought about. We read through all the stuff from the students at Auckland. We read through all the stuff from the architects who have been envisioning eco-villages here and there. Let's put together everything we know, and let's beat those suburban sprawls. Let's beat the LURP. Right? So that's what we sort of want to do now, is turn to the discussion and see, how in the world would you do that? How would we take what we've done, which we can't go on the way we have. It would have to now be over to demand from the community for the Christchurch we wanted in the first place, what we said we wanted. And how are we going to get that? Which means having to go shake hands with those developers who know their product out there on the plains and say, well, wouldn't you just as soon build this one over here? We can guarantee you the same rate of return, basically. I mean, really. Just work with us on this. Come over here instead, because that's what we want. We know what we can get, but we know we actually want something else.